So we're going to talk about it again. It was about 158, 160. Putting statins in the water. There have been doctors that have said that. I'm not one of those.
A lot of people blame or attribute better early diagnostics. What do you think about this?
So until AI can start to unpack things like that, I think AI is only going to make things worse. Welcome back to the Dr. Joe Show. We got something special planned for today. Dan, we are at a crossroads in our society right now, aren't we?
Yep.
I talked about this topic on the 16th of October of last year, and
we got receipts.
And that video didn't really get a whole lot of views. So we're going to talk about it again, and we're going to break it down for you guys because there are people of apparently really low IQ who think it's a good idea to drink seed oil and make a video about how safe it is.
As an act of defiance.
As an act of defiance to RFK Jr.'s initiatives, Maha. I think there's a lot of things to unpack here. First of all, seed oils have always been toxic, and I'm going to show you why. Okay? So right here, this is like, see, the 1910, the vascular death rate per 100,000 was about 158, 160. Okay? And then right here, around the World War II is when seed oil really started to take off and butter use kind of started to plummet. And then you see the vascular death rate. What does that say? 320 per 100,000. Okay? And then it doesn't really get better. Okay? Over here, 1984, it's 303. And then in 2000, it was about 262 deaths per 100,000. So now, where's that drop? I think that's probably statins. Okay? Now, I'm not a fan of just putting statins in the water. There have been doctors that have said that. I'm not one of those. But I think our therapeutics in medicine are part of that. But what was the vascular death rate per 100,000 in recent years? It was 263. I think it was 263 when I calculated the census for 2022. So the total number of deaths, and people can nitpick and correct me if I'm wrong, okay? If it was either 2021 or 22, 874,613 deaths that year. And for the U.S. Census that year, the total deaths per 100,000 were 263. Look it up. It's there. So that means in about 20, 30 years, our vascular death rate has not improved at all as a country. We are the sickest, most obese country of the developed world. And finally, RFK Jr. wants to talk about the cause, which is the food industry. The food industry is poisoning us. Whether they're trying to or not, they're poisoning us. And it's happening via mainly our vascular system. RFK wants to bring it up, and now he's under attack. And it's like it's a cool new thing to stand against seed oils, and it's just not, because there's tons of research that's been done. Again, I already talked about this. This study was based in Mexico. Role of arachidonic acid metabolism in STAT5 activation induced by oleic acid in MDA-MB231 breast cancer cells. So basically, seed oils promote breast cancer. What's breast cancer doing right now? It's going up. The diagnosis and the prevalence is going up. Nobody seems to care.
A lot of people,
except RFK.
A lot of people blame or attribute better diagnostic methods, early diagnostics. What do you think about this?
Well,
because the evidence is here for what you're pointing out.
You could say that maybe 10 or 15 years ago. You can't say that anymore.
Okay, so irrefutable.
I think it's irrefutable at this point. Enhancing plant seed oils for human nutrition. This came out of Delaware. What's the year on it? 2008. Plant biologists, they're talking about sustainability and some of the dangers of seed oils there. This is the one that had the sticker on it. DNA fragmentation and oxidative stress compromise sperm motility and survival in late pregnancy. Exposure to omega-9 fatty acids in rats. And this was a study that came out of Nigeria. So now it's not just omega-6, it's omega-9s. And canola oil, it's got a lot of omega-9. And what's canola oil, folks? It's rapeseed engine oil from Canada that's been around for way too long, and they stopped using it for engines, and then they said, well, why don't we eat it? That's canola oil. Okay? And
by the way, links to all these, we're going to put them?
Yeah, we're going to try and get links to all these papers, but all the titles I just listed, you should be able to find these papers. Early life exposure to omega-9 monounsaturated fatty acid results in gonadal regression and elevated stress levels in pubertal male rat. So, again, for fertility issues, and that could indirectly point to some of the confused little ones that are around now. And they're calling a mental illness and identity right now. I'll just say that. So, omega-3 fatty acids by Maggie Covington, MD, from the University of Maryland School of Medicine. Great article. This is from 2004. And, the highlight from this, they talk about rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory diseases, hypertension. Higher doses of omega-3 fatty acids are required to reduce elevated triglyceride levels and to reduce morning stiffness and the number of tender joints in patients with rheumatoid arthritis. So we have the inflammatory effect of seed oils, for which the answer is omega-3s. Okay. Importance of maintaining a low omega-6 to omega-3 ratio for reducing inflammation. This is from Open Heart by James J. I'm going to butcher his name. DiNicolantonio. I think this is the same guy who did a paper on leukocyte copper levels, if I'm not mistaken.
From Maryland.
He's from, where is he from? Anyway, this is a great article too. Fatty acid intake in relation to reproductive hormones and testicular volume among young healthy men. So what does that mean? It means seed oils shrink your testicles. That's what it means. So it causes breast cancer and it shrinks testicles and lowers testosterone.
And that short did very well, by the way, about a year ago.
That short actually did pretty good. So folks,
so people know
RFK knows what he's talking about when he says seed oils are bad. So I'm just making that really clear. He's 100% correct, and people should be happy that he's doing this.
Now, if you were in his position, okay, or let's say part of his cabinet, what would you do? What would you recommend?
So if I were on RFK's team, I would I would really try to bring medical balance and common sense and grounding to the things he's talking about. And I think he probably has a lot of doctors on his team that are trying to help him do that. Like the raw milk thing. I think the raw milk thing is sitting poorly with a lot of people. And it's because you cannot consume raw milk and make it this widespread like distribution across. It's not scalable. Yeah, that's
meant to be like farm.
It's meant to be a local thing,
farm to table kind of.
A farm to table thing, and the milk has to be fresh. And
right.
There's a reason that most states make it illegal to sell raw milk, because it won't last long enough. So if you don't live near cows, you really shouldn't be trying to get raw milk. You should maybe get your own cows, or you should go be at a place where there's cows.
Right.
And then you should see how they're getting the milk and learn about, well, what were the factors that allowed people to drink raw milk and not get sick ever? What are the factors? Because there's brucellosis. You don't want brucellosis. Brucellosis gets into the joints, and then you got some real problems. Look up brucellosis. I'm not going to talk about it.
Is that a virus or?
It's a bacteria. It's a rather tenacious bacteria that likes to get into joints and other places if you have raw milk.
Antibiotic resistant or?
it's hard to treat brucellosis. Okay, it's hard. Then there's tuberculosis. So why did milk transmit tuberculosis? It's because the people milking the cows, some of them were coughing their TB sputum into the milk that was raw, and the people were drinking the milk. So I understand the concern for raw milk. So if there's a solution to those things, and if there's a quality measure to account for the risk of infection, and listeriosis too.
Yeah,
that's a huge one, especially.
You see, that's like these tricks that the mainstream media does, because you have evidence of like seed oils, right?
Yeah.
And so does RFK. He believes the same.
Yeah.
And then they take something else that he also believes, like raw milk's good for you.
And they conflate all of his issues with one single potential problem.
Just because raw milk's not scalable to distribute and seed oils are. Yeah. They say they equate them the same. So
that's flushing the baby out with the bathwater.
Correct.
That is akin to the lowest emotional maturity imaginable. So all the people that are just blindly raging against RFK, that actually tells you how immature they actually are, because they're not looking at the positive things that he's talking about. So
how right he is.
Yeah, I mean, the raw milk thing, there's legitimate concerns, and I think the only way that's going to go forward is if those concerns are medically preventatively addressed.
Well, people should go like one issue at a time. So seed
don't
oils,
lump it all
example,
together. Yeah,
because seed oils came about because of the Industrial Revolution and capitalism in this country run amok, and the low regulatory burden. I mean, everyone's complaining now, okay, there's too much regulatory burden. Well, the low regulatory burden actually made this possible.
There's another problem with regulation. What's the opposite of government regulation? Well, assuming it's a negative effect, like you can't do this, right? Government subsidies.
Okay.
There's subsidies to corn. There are the government subsidies that go to corn, and corn that's not even edible. Dent corn, like you just use it to make grain alcohol, basically. I don't know if it have any other thing to do with it. And then where does high fructose corn syrup come from? It mostly comes from corn. I think it can come from sugar beets. Beets might actually be healthier than corn, but somebody can comment on that, because I don't know. I just thought of that. But the subsidies on corn, if RFK Jr. wants to make a big impact, the subsidies on corn need to go. The government has to stop subsidizing corn like yesterday. And then you're going to remove the incentive for farmers to plant crappy things. And then imagine you give them incentives to grow broccoli or microgreens. Imagine if you subsidize a microgreens business.
But lower shelf life, though.
Yeah, but there's ways to scale that out.
And that's where you start using the benefits of capitalism and competition.
For example, Sprouts sells literally Sprouts. So now I'm talking about the business Sprouts, and I'm talking about like the noun Sprouts. Sprouts sells Sprouts. It's pretty expensive, right? It's like $5 for a box of Sprouts. But you know that those are really good Sprouts, because when you eat them, you experience the health benefits of them. But so how do you drive that cost down? We'll take the subsidy that's going into corn, making your gasoline less efficient, and doing nothing for emissions. Oops. And put it into healthy food that's gonna build back better. You see what I did there?
So, but again, what would you do with seed oils? Like, would the subsidies?
So for seed oils, I would take the seed oils that we have, and I would make candles out of them.
But would you ban them from food products?
I would not label them edible anymore. I would say not a food product.
Would you go as far as labeling them dangerous?
You can't call them dangerous when, again, you have those low IQ people drinking seed oil on videos and saying that they're perfectly fine. You can't call it dangerous because it's not dangerous in the acute phase. It's dangerous in the long phase. And that's where the food industry gets away with a lot of insidious, frankly, crap.
And you've brought it up where they sponsor their own. I actually have a question about that, but just back to this. So would you outlaw like these products from shelves, or would you still give consumers a choice but put like warnings on them?
Well, look at what California does. You know, California puts the warning labels known to the state of California to cause whatever.
Yeah.
So the question is, what warning label would you put on seed oils?
All these articles.
So maybe the summary thing I would put on the product would be high omega-6 diets are associated with increased risk of infertility, cancer, and cardiovascular disease. Boom! That just summarized everything, or most of it. I think there's other issues too.
Are you fine with the body of literature out there to support this, or would you want more studies? You could always do with more studies, right? But we need honest attention from the medical associations that have already been bought by big pharma, like the American Diabetes Association and the American Heart Association. They need to find their souls, and they need to start looking at real evidence. Because when you tell diabetics, oh, you got to get enough carbs, why? Because you want to put me on more insulin. Because you give them more insulin, then they need to eat more carbs, and they gain more weight, and then their A1Cs never actually go down. Insulin's cheap. I mean, I don't.
No, it's not.
No,
insulin is not cheap at all. Insulin is extremely expensive. Depends on what kind of insurance you have, but no, insulin is not cheap at all.
Well, that's supposedly one of the things Biden did was make it cheaper.
Maybe he did. So I didn't know that. I still have patients that complain about how expensive insulin is. So that's clinical experience. I'm not saying Biden did or didn't do anything because I wasn't paying attention to that.
I think they found a way to make the pharmacy benefit managers negotiate directly with drug companies, and then Eli Lilly and them drop their prices on because of that pressure. But the point of the ADA is they have the incentive to keep the patients sick by recommending these things, because the food pyramid's all screwed up. Has anyone formally come out and said the food pyramid's wrong?
I mean, you have the federal government making the food pyramid, and the federal government has no authority or expertise to make the food pyramid.
Have they ever retracted their mistakes when new evidence comes out?
No, they're just making the food pyramid worse every time they update it. It just gets worse.
They make it worse.
Yeah, they're making it worse. The cereal debacle recently. RFK was talking about certain cereals and stuff. Well, he's talking about this paper in part. Okay, thyroid, various possible toxicants involved in thyroid dysfunction. A review. Okay, look it up, folks. It's actually not that long of a read, and
hypothyroid mostly.
Yeah, thyroid disruptors, because it can cause hypo or hyperthyroid. Okay. Depending on what you're talking about. But the types of fats, the role of dietary fat, the soy products. So there's a lot of soy products. I mean, virtually all soy products. You can't trust them. I've seen this clinically a lot of times. And this isn't medical advice, folks, okay? This is just an observation. You got to run this by your doctor. But
this is a MAHA analysis.
This is a MAHA suggestion to question. If you reduce your soybean oil intake, can you improve your mildly dysfunctional thyroid that doesn't require meds yet? Because it would seem from some people's clinical experience that when you throw out the mayonnaise and when you throw out the creamy salad dressings, first ingredient in both of those is soybean oil. When you throw those out, then the TSH gets a little bit better. And I've seen this many times. TSH is mildly elevated. Okay, subclinical hypothyroidism. Let's recheck it. Most of the time, doctors don't do anything. They're, let's just recheck it, and we're not going to do anything. Well, I tell people stop the mayonnaise, stop the creamy dressings. And I've seen more oftentimes than not, when people actually listen, their TSH normalizes. So folks can comment on that if they've seen it happen. And I would love for there to be a study on that. But
so on to the studies. One of the podcasts we took a deep dive on was this whole notion of scientism and how the only positive articles you can find on these products were sponsored by the manufacturer.
Yeah.
But when I brought this up to a colleague of mine who doesn't work in the food industry, but he works in drugs, he said, well, how is that different from like Pfizer sponsoring a study on breast cancer? Mm-hmm. And I had to think about that because, I mean, is it different? Do you see it's different? Like a double-blind, placebo-controlled versus the food studies that they do? Like, is that a good argument on his part, or do you think he's missing the point here?
Okay, and breast cancer incidence is increasing.
Right, but
and the CDC is saying that. So, I mean, Pfizer can do a study on breast cancer all they want. They can fund the study because they're testing a therapeutic. So they're looking at therapeutic outcomes, and they're looking at the quality measures that people care about, like recurrence and mortality rate and quality of life, if it's a really good study. But so I think whether a study is funded by a company, it's not as much that. It's is there any measurable effect that the company is having on the study besides funding? Because you can fund something and have this hands-off thing. I mean, grocery stores, they ask you to donate to things.
Right,
but actually the grocery store benefits from the donation. You don't. They benefit tax-wise from the donation, and you don't at all.
Right.
So, but, you donated to something and there's funding that went into something happening, and you don't really have any say in it. But I asked AI this, and there's a short about this. I asked AI if it had a way of determining if there were any financial conflicts of interest about how the study was written, based on the authors, based on what available evidence there is about the author's backgrounds. Because sometimes on the paper they'll say the author has nothing to disclose, but there's one author, and it's about how I'll pick on Canada right now. There was an article from this director of Canadian food supply, something like that, and it was the article about how mineral content in their grown foods is meaningless when it comes to human health and nutrition. But the person worked for the very industry that was being scrutinized by the study that person wrote. So that's your job. So your payroll depends on making your institution look good. So while you didn't get paid for the study, you took your personal time to write an article that people said, oh, wow, it's a great article, but it was really a baseless article and nobody really cared or checked. And you're basically saying that the institution that you represent is good. And there's no money to track because the only thing you invested in it was your time. You didn't get paid. So until AI can start to unpack things like that, I think AI is only going to make things worse. So, and I don't know how we started talking about AI, but
well, it's gonna be integrated into everything we do going forward.
No, I know why we started talking about AI, because if people are so blind to financial conflicts of interest that are just glaringly obvious, American Heart Association and American Diabetes Association, they get money from big food and big pharma, and I say that to other doctor colleagues, and their eyes just glaze over, and they have nothing to say, and they just stare off into space. You can't wait for AI to do it, is what I'm saying.
I see.
you need to change. And that's why I think RFK Jr. is onto something with reforming the food industry. And
reforming food, he wants to reform healthcare as well. So we can go down the vaccine rabbit hole, or we can save that for another pod. There's also psychedelics he wants to do more of, and he talked about some things he does want to pursue: psychedelics, peptides, and
the FDA's
nutraceuticals and things.
The nutraceuticals is something that I really am passionate about. Like
they do studies on those too.
Well, the FDA doesn't want people to have nicotinamide mononucleotide anymore because there's pharmaceutical companies that want to make homologs of NMN.
Nicotinic receptor. I remember doing some schizophrenia studies.
And so they want to control the natural product, which is actually illegal. It's actually illegal for the FDA to ban a natural product that has no demonstrable damaging effects on people.
Would that be a peptide?
Nicotinamide mononucleotide is not a peptide.
But
it's a precursor to NAD.
Right.
Yeah. But peptides, you mean?
Peptides. Yeah.
Peptides are natural products that have been discovered, and people are playing with them, I'll say, and getting some health benefits out of it. And people are doing that at their own risk. But should the peptides be evaluated differently?
And psychedelics. Psychedelics have been demonized, and the most recent one for PTSD got rejected by the FDA.
Was that DMT or was that psilocybin?
Psilocybin.
Huh. Yeah, the FDA is never going to approve of something that can actually have a lasting effect on people
until
RFK.
Maybe now.
Well, I really hope everybody just quits from the FDA because I haven't seen the FDA do a whole lot of good.
Well, if you listen,
they're understaffed anyway.
They are understaffed. Have you read the opinion op-ed piece by Vivek and Elon in the Wall Street Journal on?
No, I have not.
We should all send it to you. It's basically Javier Milei's plan for government efficiency, and it involves a lot of just slashing, and there's a lot of people understandably nervous about it. They think that there's one side of this that says, well, I really care about my food safety, and how could we be so cavalier and just slash jobs when they're, like you said, they're already understaffed?
Yeah.
Does that mean our food will not be safe? But then your argument is the food's already not safe.
The food's already terrible as a whole.
Of it, or
I mean, not all of it, but the vast majority of processed foods are terrible for you. I mean, first of all, you have to have a habit of reading the ingredients. Second of all, you have to know what ingredients are bad in the long term.
But so RFK's whole argument is, since we can't expect people to do that, and in many ways he's advocating for more regulations.
Well,
at least in this context.
Well, I think the deregulation that RFK Jr. is talking about, I think it applies to nutraceuticals, and I think it applies to
hopefully psychedelics.
Possibly to the beneficial effects of DMT and psilocybin.
To put it on a Schedule 1 is crazy.
And meanwhile, we're legalizing marijuana, which Colorado saw a surge in narcotic deaths after marijuana was legalized. So figure that one out. Well, people are on narcotics and they take cannabis and then they overdose. Okay, and more often than not, cannabis is a gateway to the really, really bad drugs.
Do you think that's the case?
It is the case. Yeah. Go watch Soft White Underbelly on YouTube. Mark Leta he's a fabulous photographer, famous guy, and he just did an interview. What was it called? It was called how human trafficking happens or something. And this woman describes how she was trafficked. Well, she came from a broken home, from parents that were using illicit drugs. She was displaced from that home, and she was put with a family member that didn't really want to take care of her. And then she ultimately runs away from home, and then some woman gives her marijuana, and then she ends up at a party at 12 years old, losing her virginity. after she gets roofied. Okay, but it started with cannabis. Okay, now this is not me demonizing every single person who's using cannabis. I'm just saying that I don't think it should be as I don't think it should be perceived as 100% benign, because there's only negative effects if you're exposed to it in younger years. We could do a whole podcast just about.
We probably should
about cannabis and
cannabis, psychedelics.
Yeah, I've seen cannabis ruin people's lives, and they did nothing else but just cannabis. You know, I've seen it make mental illness worse in people who already had mental illness. I've seen it help people who are getting through really bad trauma. I've seen it help people getting through certain types of traumas, you know,
pain and things.
You know,
like
so there's a handful of people that benefit from it, but yeah.
And we've also seen food ruin people's lives, and
every
underserved area. I mean, they want to talk about DEI a lot in our industry.
Yeah.
They refuse to address the root of the problems, which are, if you go to any hood, in the U.S., you're not going to find Sprouts and Whole Foods. You're going to find Jack in the Box, McDonald's, like seed oil factories.
Yeah.
You're not going to find Whole Foods, but in the upper class neighborhoods, you will. So that's where the disparities start. That's where DEI starts, and RFK has talked about this.
Yeah.
He wants to make it easier for people in poorer communities to have access to healthy food.
And have education.
Well, that's
measure it with the ability to understand their food.
But that's going to take generation to solve. But what you can do right away with subsidies is give incentives to, instead of paying people to make corn, open a health food store in, an underserved area or a poor, low-income area. And they're going to say, well, crime is the issue. We're worried about shoplifting. Well, we'll give you incentives to mitigate that, just like HUD, housing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's one of the things I think Department of Housing maybe got right. I don't know if it's always implemented properly, but...
Yeah. I think... Well... I definitely agree it's not going to get changed overnight, and it's not guaranteed to work.
Especially not the educational part. That takes time.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Department of Education, if that gets abolished, woohoo, we'll see.
Well, people are going to be complaining about that.
They're going to be complaining about that.
This administration doesn't care about our education. They slash jobs. They don't care about our health. They slash jobs.
As they attack, the family unit for decades,
right?
And they emasculate men and masculinize women, and people wonder why the divorce rate is so high. It's a tangled web of a bunch of things that I think are actually all related.
In one of Jordan Peterson's book, the first one, Maps of Meaning, I think it's a must read. He said, "As parents are to children, so is culture to adults." Mm-hmm. And all the things you just mentioned are inherently embedded in our culture, and it's as of recent, like 2 decades maybe. And they started before that, but the last 2 decades they really started accelerating. 2004, that's when I went to college, graduated.
Yeah, graduated high school in 2004.
There you go. You're a youngin', man. But yeah, I mean, we can obviously go on forever about these topics, and maybe with Maha, one of the good things is it's causing this to be mainstream, because when we started this channel, it was on the fringe kind of topics, right?
Yeah.
And now it's slowly moving more into mainstream.
Yeah, I think it's we're at a shifting point now in consciousness.
So overall,
and we have the potential to actually promote a lot of positive health changes.
So if you had to answer in one word, good or bad?
Seed oils?
No. We know the answer to that. One word, good or bad, Maha movement.
Good. Maha is good. I have a few concerns.
What are those? It was just real
I
quick,
mean, like I said, it was just the raw milk thing,
okay.
and
that's a scalability issue.
And some of the other, there were some other things that were concerning that we don't need to go into, but the seed oil thing is like that. Like that's again, folks.
So for you, if you were in that
seed
role,
oils were made. Okay, seed oils were first put into our food supply after the Civil War. Okay, and cardiovascular death was not as prevalent until the seed oil industry really took off, and there's nobody that can deny that by looking at the data. And all these other studies talking about omega-6
in your opinion,
excess.
seed oils is the number one right now culprit to our health, you would say, or to our health systems, to everything.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at, I mean, it took seed oil, like from 1865, see, there's no data before 1910 here, so it's hard to know what this line looked like between 1865 and 1910, but, you know, you see the per capita consumption of margarine and butter in this particular case. But right when margarine use starts to take an uptick, and that's when you start to see the cardiovascular death rate go up, and
that was
there was also probably like other oils that were coming in at that time, and then we know that after World War II is when the canola oil started to appear from Canada. So, and then there's vegetable oil and safflower and sunflower and cottonseed and grapeseed and rapeseed. So I think cutting the prevalence of that as a food option and replacing it with the healthier oils. And you could just get a functional medicine doctor or a naturopath in there to help choose the oils. And you can get a panel of 10 of them and just say, okay, these are the oils that we all agree on based on naturopathy and functional medicine, and then done, finished.
And then see what's expensive and figure out ways to subsidize production of those.
Yeah.
So it's not complicated.
Yeah, and then work on making the olive oil industry honest.
But the lobbyists, they're going to be pissed.
That's
what it boils down to.
So you cut the seed oils, you remove the corn subsidies, and then you this is the aspartame and the sucralose stuff here.
I mean,
and
we
then
did two full, like when it was fringe.
Yeah,
has RFK come out against aspartame or sucralose? Or
I would be really surprised if he didn't, and if he wasn't against. I mean, he's got to be against aspartame.
He probably doesn't see it as a huge threat, like as some of this other stuff. And
yeah,
the other thing he's really against that people in my industry are worried about is the vaccines. But I mean, that's another. We should probably spend another podcast.
We could spend an entire podcast on that. Maybe later, only if people really want us to. I think there's a lot of podcasts about that topic now.
Yeah,
it just seems kind of old. Just like vaccines, like it's kind of an old topic to
but
talk
it's
about.
coming back though because of Maha.
Yeah,
but this is the food is like his number one.
Yeah, like the yellow 5, the yellow 6, the red 40.
He's
that brown coloring that's in Cocoa Puffs, and it's in like all these cereals, and that's part of the thyroid disruptor things, you know. So
the color and the dyes
and benzoic acid as a preservative. Benzoic acid is a known thyroid disruptor. And heavy metals, you know, and so it'll be interesting. But yes, seed oils are bad for you folks, and if you disagree, you're wrong. Sorry.
Yeah, hard to argue with the data. I'd like to find a paper that shows that it's not bad for you.
You're gonna find some that were funded by pharmaceutical industry,
but like long-term outcomes, like
it's gonna be hard to get really long-term outcome studies because we just have pieces, you know, like the impact of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acid ratio on cytokine release in human alveolar cells. So what is this paper about? So this is about cytokine release in lung cells. What are cytokines? They're chemicals released during times of stress and usually infection.
Cytokine storms.
Yeah, cytokine
Everyone
storm.
should know that from COVID now.
Yeah, COVID, caused cytokine storm, and that's what killed a lot of people. So the omega-3 and omega-6 ratio, when it's optimized, then there's less of that cytokine release. So then you have to then extrapolate as a proactive preventative strategy that we should that we should ideally make that ratio good, because then it might improve outcomes. So this study could be expounded upon by maybe loading up people with pneumonia on omega-3 fatty acids when they come into a hospital. How hard of a study would that be for people that can take stuff by mouth, but they got a rip-roaring pneumonia and they're admitted? Give them some omega-3.
Now, just maybe last topic before, maybe a cliffhanger, but hard to deny the GLP-1 success. I mean, you see someone losing weight now and you don't even ask anymore. You just know.
Yeah.
You know, like nobody asks anyone anymore. Like, how'd you do it? It's just,
how'd you do it?
Everyone assumes, this person's on Ozempic.
I got a lot of patients, though, that are not using any medications, and they're doing it just by following my recommendations.
Yeah, but everyone's assuming they're taking a GLP.
Right. Yeah.
But the answer, like, industry would argue with you. The answer to this, Dr. Joe, is this new thing we've developed, right? GLP. Now we have a triple GLP.
Yeah.
Like, as a clinician that practices, what are your thoughts on this? Like, good and the bad of GLP. Maybe we should do a whole pod on that too.
The good and bad of GLP. I mean, well, first of all, they're derived from animal venoms, and animal venoms are designed to poison us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that to think about. In like evolutionarily, what were those peptides designed to do?
They're like evolved from Gila monster venom.
They were designed to poison us so that we would stop picking up the Gila monster. It's like, okay, you're poisoned, but you better not pick me up again, you know. So number one, we don't really know the long-term effects of these things, so we should not say that they're perfectly safe.
Right.
And then there's side effects that occur post-marketing that we need to be watching out for.
Gastric emptying?
So you're talking about gastroparesis. So there's stuff coming from the fringe. There's buzz about gastroparesis induced by the GLPs, and yeah, maybe I haven't seen a case of it yet.
Okay.
I've seen side effects. I've seen adverse reactions. Haven't seen that one yet.
Oh, yeah, like diarrhea and GERD.
The typical. I've seen the common things, and then I've seen uncommon things. But I read a paper recently. You know, the risk of blood clots goes up over twofold when people take certain GLPs.
Didn't know.
Blood clots.
Blood clots.
Yeah.
So strokes, aneurysms.
Well, I think it was thromboembolism. I think it was DVTs mainly, if I'm not. Yeah. So
vein thrombosis.
Yeah. So that's sort of important. Right?
Yeah.
Because, even in med school, we knew way before I was in med school that smoking with birth control basically guarantees that a woman is going to get a blood clot. Right?
Smoking while on birth control.
Smoking while on birth control. Those two things together synergize, and it just makes the risk of blood clots astronomical, and it almost guarantees a blood clot at some point.
Wow.
So it's not if, it's when. So are we looking at a possible, in certain people, a possible effect of that with GLPs? That remains to be seen. And then there was that suicidal ideation case. It came from I think England or from somewhere. So they want to put that as a black box warning. And so I think weight loss medications change your perception of reality. They don't actually burn fat off your body. So you're going to, at the end of the day, if there's an eating disorder up here that's really, really strong, then something I take here or inject here might not be stronger than the thing that's here. So you got to do something about the software that's been installed with monthly updates. Okay, and its own antivirus software. The eating disorders are that powerful.
This relates to our philosophy pod last.
Yeah.
Which did surprisingly well.
Yeah. Yeah,
We'll do one of those.
I was kind of hoping for more comments on that one, just about some of the different things, but I think it was maybe it was too far out there
it's
for
people. Evergreen. I mean, you'll get comments for the next 10 years from now on.
Yeah, maybe
that won't go away.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this was good. I think clearly we have a roadmap for the next couple of pods at least. And anything else you'd like to?
I mean, I want to get back into the community actually for the next for the cool months of that we still have here in Yuma. True. Like I still want to get with David Marchuk,
Earthworm,
the Earthworm Master, Desert Mirage Farms. Check out Desert Mirage Farms, guys. Check it out. Yeah. Look at the website. The guy's like a plant whisperer.
A local genius.
He talks to your microbiome and makes it flourish.
Yeah, he really does. He's connected to it.
And there's a greens guy in town. I still haven't called him. I'm going to call you. I will. I want to call you. Okay. There's a guy in town. He's growing greens, and I need to see what he's about. And then there was another. Wanted to bring Leslie back.
Yes.
And then there's with the hospice group, there's another podcast we were planning for that. So folks, there's like a bunch of stuff that we're planning, and that's just a sneak peek at some of the stuff we're gonna do, hopefully soon.
And you've been on the Maha movement since before RFK was.
Yeah, I was Maha before it was Maha. Okay. And
well, you are Maha. Make Yuma healthy again.
Yeah, and then the functional medicine doctors of the planet and the naturopaths of the planet were Maha way before I was Maha. So, so check yourself. Seed oils are bad. See you later.